Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Today I'm back in my old cheap Soviet spec S-Class Mercedes, which is finally fixed and ready to go. If you haven't watched the first episode of this old Mercedes video, you might want to go back and watch that, otherwise everything I'm about to talk about won't make much sense. Basically, a few months ago I bought what I thought at the time was a very cheap old S-Class Mercedes. I paid just £3,500 for this car. But it turned out to be quite a basic model, and it also had a number of problems. I quickly realised that it wasn't the bargain I thought it was. My emotions and feelings towards this car have been up and down from the very beginning. At first I liked it because I thought it was a cheap Mercedes. Then for a period I hated it because it was just bill after bill after bill. And then now it's all sorted, I've really grown attached to it. So yeah, a bit of a roller coaster of emotions. There's something about an S-Class Mercedes. There's just a touch of class to it that you don't find in many other cars. It makes you feel important. I know you'll probably snigger at that because most passers-by will just see this as an old 14-year-old car that's not worth an awful lot of money. But I'm talking about the actual driving experience. Every time you get behind the wheel, it makes you feel important and special. It's so refined and quiet and smooth. It really makes you feel completely disconnected from the outside world, which, as an introvert, is quite a nice feeling. And the ride quality is just unrivaled. It's so comfortable. Obviously, you've got air suspension. I've got the smaller wheels, which again improves the ride quality. And the seats are so padded and comfortable. I would drive anywhere now with this car. In fact, it's a perfect road trip car. You could do hundreds of miles a day in this thing and just not feel exhausted or tired or fatigued. The steering's nice and light. The turning circle's very good. There's just something quite imperious about the S-Class driving experience, and that's kind of addictive in itself. The 3-litre V6 turbo diesel engine under the bonnet is a perfect match for this car as well because it's much more economical than the petrol models. So with a full tank of fuel, you'll do 600 miles before you need to refill. It really would be capable of crossing continents this without you having to stop many times. It's so torquey, this car. I don't know the exact torque figure off the top of my head, so maybe I'll add that in afterwards. It's really quite a good match for this car. You put your foot down, there's a little bit of turbo lag, to be fair, but then all of a sudden it pins you into your seat and just keeps pulling and pulling and pulling. Anyway, onto the issues that this car had, which have now been resolved. There was an oil leak, the driver's window didn't work. What else? All the tyres were bald. There was just quite a bit of general maintenance that it needed that had been neglected. And also occasionally when you tried to start it, the very first attempt, it would start and then cut out immediately, so you'd have to start it again. So they were the main issues I had to deal with. To fix the driver's window, I stripped the door down, and usually I thought it's got to be a driver's window regulator or a window switch. Anyway, it wasn't the regulator, that was fine. So I ordered a new switch, or a used switch from a Mercedes breaker. That didn't work either. In the end, I took it to a place called SPR, who are a Mercedes specialist in Stockport, and they got to the problem straight away. Now, it turned out to be a software update, which cost about £100, but have you ever heard of anything so overly complicated? A software update sorted the window. So now it all works. So that was quite a simple fix in the end. Had I taken it there directly and not faffed around with the regulator or the switch, it would have saved me some money. I also needed to get a new headlamp switch because there was an issue with the lights. So I got the window switch and the headlamp switch from a company called Dronsfield, who are Mercedes breakers, who initially were very helpful and happy to help. And I thought, oh, this is good, the fact that I've just discovered this new Mercedes breaker, I'll use those in the future. Anyway, when I called them to say they'd sent me the wrong headlamp switch and I needed a refund on the window switch because it didn't cure it, the guy got very stroppy and quite difficult to deal with. And as yet, I still haven't received a refund. I called them twice last week and they still wouldn't give me a refund because they claimed they hadn't received the parts, which isn't true because I posted them first class about 6 weeks ago. Also, while it was at SPR, they attended to a few other issues as well. So the misfire, it turned out to have a misfire on cylinder 3. So they checked the injector and there was nothing actually wrong with the injector. So they put some injector cleaner fluid through it and advised me to do some miles in it using premium diesel. And they also said, which is something that I've always insisted for years and they've just confirmed it, they also said don't let the tank run low and try and use premium fuel because it will help the injectors. So that's exactly what I've done, hence me doing like 500 miles in this thing. It also had a throttle body, which they coded into the car, and the DPF had exceeded its limits, so they had to reset that and do a forced regeneration of that. And since then it's been fine. So now if you put your foot down, there's no misfire whatsoever, and it's got all the power in the world. This is a beast, this thing, you know. Quite impressed with that. So all that work at SPR, including the £100 for the window, cost me £208 in total, which I didn't think was too bad. But at that point, I'd already spent quite a lot of money on this car. The next job to sort out was the oil leak. Now, quite a lot of you guessed correctly that it was the oil cooler that was leaking. It turns out to be quite a common issue on this 3-litre diesel engine. Now, the actual part wasn't too expensive, but there were lots of hours labour because it's buried within the V of the engine. So, yeah, that cost me quite a few £100s to sort that out, but now it doesn't leak any oil. On top of those main faults, it also needed a full service. So I've had a full oil filter, pollen, air, fuel filter, I've had all those replaced. It needed 4 tyres, which I've replaced with brand new ones. I was thinking of going for a new set of wheels, a bigger set, but some of you said that would ruin the ride, so I took your advice there and stuck with these original wheels, which I've had refurbished because they were quite curbed and the lacquer was starting to peel. So I've had the wheels refurbished and I've had 4 new tyres. They're not the best brand, to be honest. In fact, I'd never even heard of them, but they're brand new, so they'll do for a few thousand miles. It also needed new brake discs and pads front and rear, so it's had those replaced. So now it stops on a sixpence. The next job, I had the auto gearbox serviced. Now, my mechanic said when he drained the fluid out of the gearbox, it was black, so it must have been the original 13 or 14-year-old oil. So that was quite a wise decision to have that done. It'll just prolong its life. And it's not an expensive job to do, so I always recommend getting that done. If you've got an automatic gearbox, by the time it gets to 80 or 90,000 miles, you really want to get the fluid changed. After that, I got Paul from UK Pro Tints to come round and tint the rear windows. I just went with like a medium grade tint, so it looked like genuine Mercedes privacy. I didn't want anything too, East End, low ranking drug dealer spec. I just wanted it to look a little bit more modern and classy, which I think it's done. It's sort of transformed it. Looks much sportier. Then I had a full detailed valet. I had the car buffed and waxed and all that stuff. So I think it looks really good. For a 14-year-old car, it's quite a good transformation. So I've discovered after all of this, something that I think I already knew already. There's no such thing as a cheap Mercedes. You're probably wondering by now what I've spent on this car, so let me just pull over and do the calculations for you. So the new budget tyres cost me £269.40. I told you they were cheap tyres. The oil cooler job, the total job all done and fitted, was £434.64. The full engine service and the brakes, and also, I forgot to mention this, it needed a new battery because there were loads of, when my mechanic plugged in the code reader, there were loads of faults with the car, and a battery cured that. But being an S-Class Mercedes and they're massively over-engineered, it took 2 batteries. So there's one in the boot and there's one up front. So yeah, 2 batteries, a full engine service, and brake discs and pads cost me £1,008.14. The window tints cost me £110. Then you've got the valet, buff, wheel refurbs, that cost me £180. Then the bill at SPR, that was £208. The parts at Dronsfield were £100, which I'm yet to get back, so hopefully that'll be knocked off. My gearbox service cost £144, so the total comes to £2,454.18. Which is more than I thought. This all feels a little bit familiar. If I sold this for the asking price, which is unlikely, but bear with me, let's try and keep the glass half full, not half empty, I would make a total profit of £45, which is smashing business, isn't it? It's like an episode of Wheeler Dealers, this, isn't it? Core Ed, we ain't half made a few quid out of this one, son. Made like £200. Well, Mike, that's not strictly true, is it? Because I've spent the last 3 weeks grafting my balls off on it. Anyway, that's just how it goes in this job sometimes. But still, when you think about how much car you get for the money, right, this owes me the best part of £6,000 now. It's still an awful lot of car for the money. And I've now got a nice looking, nice driving, well kept and well maintained S-Class Mercedes that's done 111,000 miles. And it does make me feel good, the fact that I've kept this car on the road and it will still be around in many years to come. What really winds me up is, why didn't the previous owner do this? They've just neglected this beautiful car and let it rot. It's not right, is it? That's sort of what I enjoy about doing these kind of projects, to be honest. I know there's no money in it, so it's all a bit pointless, really. But I do get some sort of weird satisfaction knowing that I've saved and looked after a car. And this was definitely worthy of that. I mean, for example, had I not bought it at £3,500, somebody else would have bought it at £3,500, not spent a penny on it, and in 6 months' time or a year's time, something bad would have happened, the gearbox would have gone or the turbo would have blown, and it had just been written off and crushed. It seems like such a waste. I feel like nowadays we're always told we should be recycling more and watching our consumption, and yet too many people will just crush a perfectly acceptable, perfectly good car rather than spend some money on it. It's madness. One thing I've forgotten to mention, here in the UK, car dealers have to pay VAT on their gross profit, which means it's currently set at 20%. So my gross profit on this car, the difference between the sale price of hopefully 6 grand and what I bought it for at 3.5, my gross profit is 2.5 grand. So I've got to pay VAT on 20% of 3.5 grand. There goes my £45 profit, doesn't it? I always think it's quite unfair that car dealers have to pay the VAT, because we're one of the few industries in the UK that we just have to suffer it. We have to pay VAT, but we're not allowed to charge it. So for example, if I buy a car for £1,000 and sell it for £2,000, I have to pay 20% of that £1,000 profit, which is fine, I suppose. But if I buy a car for £1,000, spend £1,000 on it, and still only sell it for £2,000, I still have to pay 20% of that gross £1,000 margin, which I just don't think is right. But anyway, there's not much I can do about that. Let me work that out then. If I have to pay 20% of 2.5 grand, that's the actual 20% of that is £415. If I put that against my £45 profit, yeah, there we go. I would make a loss on this car at the asking price of £370. Not very good at this job, am I? Anyway, I'm quite happy with the outcome, so I'll just have to forget about that, I suppose, but hopefully it'll serve as a lesson to you all, really. There is no such thing as a cheap Mercedes. But to be honest with you, you never really want to buy the cheapest of anything. I see this happen all the time. People just are obsessed with the price. Nobody cares about value, they care about price. And they're two different things. You shouldn't really go after the cheapest thing. You want the best value, not the lowest price. And quite often, once you've found something that's the lowest price, it will cost you big time in the pocket. So thanks once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'll leave the links below. If you've got any comments or questions, let me know and I'll do my best to get back to you. So cheers guys, I'll see you next time.